and understanding in a very respectful environment, and to get a opportunity to learn from different faith traditions on very timely topics. My name's Mitzi, Lynton, and I am the Vice President of the Board of the Arizona Interfaith Movement, and I really welcome each and every one of you here today. We have a wonderful, exciting panel today, and some people who've actually never been to a faith forum before, an Arizona Interfaith Movement faith forum, so we welcome them at our faith forum this morning. And the topic is the death of religion. Studies show that people are dropping out of organized religions and are moving towards a generalized spirituality, or simply no religion at all. How does your faith view this movement? How are you accommodating the shift in your services? Reacting with fear? Embracing new outreach methods? So today what our panelists are going to share on is that topic. Do they feel that it is indeed the death of religion? And how, if that is so, are they responding to things? How are they responding to that question? So how this is going to unfold this morning is that each panelist will have between 8 to 10 minutes to speak. And Ron, over here, my beloved husband, is going to be our timekeeper. And in 8 minutes, hopefully he'll give me some type of a symbol so that I can let you know you have it's 8 minutes. And then at 10 minutes, I'll just say, time. And so hopefully we won't be any longer than 10 minutes each panelist. And then after that, after each panelist has the opportunity to share, then we will have a time of question and answers. And I'm going to introduce each panelist before they speak rather than introduce everyone now, because if you're anything like me, I can never remember it when we get to the last panels. Who was that person? So I find it more helpful to introduce just right before we have that person speak. And before we begin, I just want to extend a very happy new year to any members of the Jewish faith tradition who are here today. We know you recently celebrated Rosh Hashanah, so happy blessings and a peaceful and joy-filled new year to each person here from the Jewish faith tradition. This microphone is going out a little bit, so I'm going to switch right now. And I'm going to introduce our first panelist today, James Casey. James Casey is from Unity, and he was brought up Roman Catholic in Connecticut and actually served as an altar boy. Now, he was inspired by a priest to enter Jesuit seminary. However, when James entered high school, he knew that this was not his path. Instead, he married at age 18 and went on to college. And that marriage produced 2 wonderful sons, although it did not last, the marriage that is. James's spiritual journey is very diverse and has led him on many adventures. At 23, he was introduced to Ram Dass and studied with him for a year. Next, he studied yoga at Sivananda Yoga Center in Connecticut and met Sri Swami Satyananda, a yogi master from India who had been asked to run the center. For the next 5 years, James became part of that extended staff, helping to run the yoga center and also teaching yoga to children. James's journey then led him to study with Sri Sat Baba, a Taoist spiritual teacher, and to live in a Taoist ashram for 8 years. In 1992, while continuing to study with Baba, James moved to Scottsdale, and it was at this time, actually in 1998, that he felt the calling and the desiring to once again be part of a spiritual community, and he began attending Unity of Phoenix. He really resonates with the emphasis that Unity places on practical Christianity and the honoring of all faiths. And he served as head usher at Unity for 8 years, and for the past 5 years as a Unity ambassador. And we're honored to have James Casey on our Arizona Interfaith Movement board. He's been on our board since 2013. So won't you help me welcome James Casey.
Thank you. For those of you who may not be familiar with Unity, foundationally, we are a Christian ministry, a non-denominational Christian ministry. We state we are a positive path for spiritual living. We believe in the original blessing as opposed to coming into this world with original sin. Unity is an open-minded, accepting, spiritual community that honors all paths to God and helps people discover and live their spiritual potential and purpose. So, in essence, we are really an interfaith church, an interfaith ministry. The Bible is our foundational book, but we also pull truth from other spiritual books. So on a given Sunday, depending on who the minister might be, he may be quoting biblical scripture, or he may be talking about the Four Agreements from Don Miguel Ruiz, who is an Indian shaman. So we are very open and very accepting, and many of our congregants are people from other religions, even other Christian churches, who were seeking less structure and more empowerment. Unity teaches we are responsible. We are responsible for our life. We're responsible for our world. And it was founded in 1889 by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And their foundation was based on the power of prayer, the power of our thoughts to create our own reality. Regarding Jesus as a great example versus a great exception. And we teach the kingdom of God, or God is within, as opposed to, in some faith communities, it's taught. The feeling is God is separate. And yet, in Holy Scripture, in the Bible, Jesus talks to the disciples. The Father that dwelleth in me, dwelleth in ye also. So, I gave this introduction to kind of give you a flavor of what unity is and what unity is about, especially for those who may not be familiar at all with unity. But in respect to the question, is God dead? And about congregants falling away. I belong to Unity of Phoenix, and I specifically can tell you about Unity of Phoenix, because that's my own personal experience. I can tell you that we have basically leveled. We have not grown, but we have not shrunk. And we do have turnover. And thank God there's always new people. Let me share with you some of the things that we do at Phoenix to keep the congregants coming back. Number one, we listen to our congregants. We value our congregants. We welcome our congregants. We have a very substantial team of ushers, greeters, and chaplains. And the chaplains, people are encouraged to seek out chaplains outside of the service to pray. Because so many people coming to a church, and especially if they're new, have issues, have problems, have things that are weighing heavy on their spirit. And they need to be addressed. They need to be helped. And I believe that that's part of creating a growing ministry, is touching your congregants. So we do that through the chaplain program. I'm an ambassador, and I work the courtyard in between services. My purpose is to answer questions, greet people, honor people, especially if they're new. And to all new people that come, we give out an information packet and a flower. So for me and my job, I seek out the flower people because they're the new people. And I first start off honoring and thanking them for being here. And sometimes people say, well, you don't have to thank me. Well, we do. Because you could have turned on Joyce Meyer, Reverend Olstein, T.D. Jakes, or one of those people, watched them for a half hour, and called it a day. I did my service, God. But no, you decided to come here. And we are so grateful, and we do hope, and we encourage you to come back and to be part of our community. So I'm trying to, again, give you a flavor of what we're doing. We just recently, this year, expanded the courtyard. We built some fountains. We put in more trees, more flowers, brought in more tables to encourage fellowship. And that's probably one of the biggest features at our church is fellowship. I would venture to say that 50%, and we get approximately on a weekend, or a Sunday, excuse me, around 1,000 people. And I would say that, and I'm specifically thinking the last service because that's our largest service, there's got to be 300 people that hang out afterwards to have coffee, water, cookies, and congregate. And we even have people that facilitate tables of discussion. So our focus is on our congregation. And to add in and wrap it up, we have all kinds of different programs. Yoga, Tai Chi, discussion groups, and we have a variety of classes. And then we bring in also a variety of speakers. We used to have Wayne Dyer almost every year, Deepak Chopra, and we haven't had Deepak Chopra for a while, but he will be at our church in November. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, Neil Donald Walsh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what I believe keeps people coming back. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, James, for sharing. And what I got from you was that unity is very welcoming and really retains people, even though there's turnover, by a lot of gratitude, a lot of appreciation for people, and providing an environment where people are met, their needs are met through prayer and welcoming, and providing a lot of different opportunities. So thank you so much again for sharing. Our next speaker this morning is Johnny Martin, who is a Sufi. He is a student at ASU studying religion, public life, and conflict. And he's also extremely involved in Arizona Interfaith Movement, on our board, and really doing an outstanding job with many youth activities. He is the president and founder of Sun Devils Are Better Together, ASU's premier multi-faith student organization. And he also serves on the board for TEAM, T-E-A-M, Tempe Interfaith, and as a youth coordinator for Arizona Interfaith, which I just said. Johnny is a Sufi Muslim revert, so we'll hear about that, I'm sure, who identifies with the mystical or spiritual side of Islam. So please help me welcome Johnny Martin.
Thank you very much, Mitzi, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here with you all today, and very excited to share a little bit about my own experience. Mitzi invited me to be part of this panel, and I eagerly accepted because I sort of represent an individual who is part of this trend that we're discussing today, which is the movement away from organized religion and towards a more personal, individual spirituality. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey because I've gone in and out of different traditions in my short 22 years on the planet. But I've learned a lot, and there's a reason that I'm as actively involved with the interfaith movement as I am today. So I was raised non-denominational evangelical Christian, and my parents are very devout, and I went to church every weekend from the time that I was born until I was 18 and was told that I could make my own decisions. But around the time I was in high school, I sort of fell away from the tradition. And there were a variety of reasons for that. I do think part of it was just sort of your standard teenage rebellion and just wanting to be my own person and find my own way. But also I had some deep intellectual questions and sort of theological problems that I couldn't justify in my own mind. And some of those stem from the idea that the faith was very exclusive, and that there was a certain requirement for salvation that really didn't have anything to do with a person's character or the quality of their heart. And now I'm not saying that that's something that's true for people who identify that way, and since that was in high school, and so that was 7-8 years ago. Since then I've learned some of the deeper truths that I was raised in the tradition that I was raised in. But I decided to reject it. But instead of exploring alternatives, I sort of just adamantly rejected the idea of faith and religion altogether. So I declared myself an atheist, and I told my parents that was how I identified. But unlike many of the atheists I know who are involved in the interfaith movement today, who are secular humanists, I was decidedly anti-religious. And so my belief was that religion was bad, and that it was harmful. And if somebody wanted to discuss their beliefs with me, I usually wasn't very nice about it. And so I lived that way for about 4 years. And I started actually, I went through a lot of challenges in my life, both ups and downs. But my freshman year at Arizona State University, I took a class called Religions of the World. And I took this class as an atheist with the intention of learning about different religions so that I could tell people why they were wrong. Okay, so I wanted to learn what Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and even other types of Christians believed so that I could find a way to disprove it, or if I'm in a conversation with that person, challenge them to rethink their beliefs. And the class totally blew my mind. Okay, so I went in and the way that class works is that unit by unit, you go through different traditions. And so the first unit we spent on Hinduism, and a week and a half into the class, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, maybe I've been Hindu all along. And I've just been waiting to learn what that actually meant. Because on the surface level, you just hear, oh, there's millions and millions and millions of gods, and one of them has an elephant head, and there's all this other, and you're like, oh, I don't understand how that can make any sense. But then when you dig in deeper, and you learn the philosophy, and you learn about samsara, and that we're all trapped in cycles of life, suffering, death, and rebirth, and that the way this works is through karma, and that if you devote yourself to selfless action, you might one day break free of this cycle, and you could not exist at all, which is called moksha, and it's ultimately the idea of heaven in Hinduism. But then we went into Buddhism for the next unit, and I thought, wait a minute, I like this too. This is a totally different perspective, but it seems equally as valid. And this is what happened unit by unit. Each tradition, I remember thinking, well, this makes sense. I could easily see myself being part of this faith. So I decided that I wasn't an atheist, and I decided that I believed in God, or gods, or something divine, something supernatural. And I remember thinking, well, my whole problem with religion is that all these people from different religions can't get along. And there's this narrative in the world that we're all going to destroy each other because of our disagreements about things we can't even prove. But when I learned about these traditions, I said each one of these compels its adherents to be kind, and to have empathy, and compassion, and integrity, and forgiveness, and self-reflection. And I remember thinking, well, if these values are universal to all of these faiths, couldn't people just focus on that instead of the doctrine or the dogma? I mean, maybe use those things as a vehicle to lead yourself closer to those values, but your focus should be on the values themselves, because that's what will bring humanity together. And I spent 2 or 3 years as a pluralist, because I couldn't pick one of the religions that I decided I liked. So I told people that I was Christian and Muslim and Hindu and Buddhist, all at the same time. Which a lot of people thought was cool, but most people don't take you seriously if you make a claim like that. And I really wrestled with that, because I really did want to identify with each of these traditions that I love so much. But mostly, and people in my generation thought, oh, right on, man, that's cool, yeah, do your own thing. But I found that a lot of my elders just thought I was crazy, or that I, was trying to do something ridiculous and impossible. And about a year ago, and this was during a time when I started getting very involved with interfaith, about a year ago, a Muslim friend of mine invited me to go to the mosque. And I'd always really wanted to do this, because again, I considered myself a Muslim, in addition to being Christian, Hindu, and Buddhist. But I'd never been to the mosque, and I was way too nervous to actually go there, because I thought, well, I'm going to be just a white guy in the mosque, and I won't know what I'm doing, and people are going to look at me like, why is he here? But my friend invited me. He said, I'll go with you, I'll show you how we pray, it'll be okay. It's a safe place, even if you're not a Muslim. There's non-Muslims that come in there all the time just to observe, and to learn more about the tradition. So I said, okay, I would love to go with you. And my friend Muhammad showed me how to pray. And as I went through this process of learning the prayer and learning, the things that are recited during a prayer, these daily prayers that are done 5 times a day, something just felt right. something connected with my spirituality and with my soul, and I felt the presence of God, not only in the masjid, in the mosque, in that space, but in my heart. I could feel that God was the one who led me here. And so I told him that I really enjoyed this, and I thanked him for inviting me. And he said, well, why don't you come back tomorrow and pray with the congregation? Tomorrow is Jummah, which is the holy day of the week for Muslims, on Friday. And I said, yeah, I would love to. And so the next day I prayed with the congregation, and within 10 or 20 minutes of being there, I decided that I wanted to take my shahada, which is the declaration of faith that a Muslim makes in front of witnesses to officially revert, which is basically converting. We call it reverting because we believe that I was always meant to be Muslim, and I just found my way back to the path. But, so to go back, that's my story, and I've been a Muslim now for about a year. Actually, my 1-year anniversary of my Shahada is coming up on the 23rd according to the Islamic calendar, or October 3rd according to the Western calendar. I converted on Arafat, which is actually an Islamic holiday. But I don't identify as a Sunni Muslim, which is what a majority of Muslims are, and that's the mosque that I converted at was a Sunni mosque. And I don't identify as a Shia Muslim either, which is what is usually seen as the other kind of Islam, which is more of a minority. I identify as a non-denominational Sufi Muslim. And Sufism is a tradition that is as old as Islam itself, and if you look it up online or in an encyclopedia, it's described as the mystical or spiritual side of Islam. And basically the reason that I'm a Sufi, first of all, I haven't made up my mind on the Sunni-Shia split and all those differences. It's still something I'm learning about today. But Sufism really is a path to purify one's heart. And it's the idea that I don't need an intermediary between me and God. I have a personal relationship with my Creator. And if I see Muslims or a mosque doing something that I disagree with, which is something that is happening to me right now, today, with that very mosque that I converted at, if there's something I disagree with, I have my own autonomy and actually a responsibility to stand up for what I believe is right, even against other Muslims. And so I'm part of this trend, towards personal spirituality, and I hope you've enjoyed my story that I've shared with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. That was wonderful, because I didn't know all that about you. So it's wonderful, first of all, to hear your story, and also to give us a perspective of someone who's very young and their journey spiritually. So I really appreciate that. And I love what you said about the narrative. You said that the narrative that you had really kept hearing in your head and things was that we'll destroy each other because we can't get along religiously. And what I love about Arizona Interfaith Movement is look at us here. Just take a look around right now. Take a moment to look around and see there are so many different faiths represented, and even denominations represented in here, and we're all peaceful in this room. We're learning about each other. We're not trying to say you're wrong or I'm right. We're just having an opportunity to really grow with each other, understand you, so that our motto through the Arizona Interfaith Movement is really the golden rule, so that we can live the golden rule regardless of what faith tradition we are, that we can emanate that out to everyone we meet. So thank you for that. Dr. Leah, I would love if I might switch and have Preston go next. Would that be okay with you? So I'd like Preston to go next, if that's possible. I just got that download right now. And so Preston, Najeeb, did I say that? Najeeb Basha is LDS, and he is a native Arizonan. Do we have any other native Arizonans in the room today? I know we have at least one, Ron. Yes, we have a couple. He was born and raised in Chandler, growing up and following in the footsteps of his grandfather, Eddie Basha, and father, Edward. Preston learned from a young age the value of hard work and dedication to his family. After graduating high school, Preston served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Toronto, Canada. When he returned home, he attended ASU and received a bachelor's degree focusing on business and legal studies. Now, while he continues to work for the family business, the family entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well in Preston, and with his brothers and longtime colleagues, he has helped found Chem-Free H2O, an environmentally friendly water company based here in Phoenix. In his leisure time, Preston is an avid and accomplished golfer, but he says that he enjoys all sports. However, the thing that brings Preston the most happiness is his family. His lovely wife Peyton, who is expecting a boy in January 2016, and their firstborn son Jet, who is 2 years old, going on 10. Please help me welcome Preston.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take Mitzi around with me everywhere I speak and have her introduce me because she did it with such enthusiasm. By the time we get through my bio, I think half the time everyone's asleep in the room, and I just put them even more asleep by the end of my discussion with them. I'm grateful to be here. You know, it's an honor to be a part of the interfaith. I do have to say you all are missing out on my mother being here. She does a much better job than I do of explaining things, and she's a wonderful woman. And hopefully next time she'll be able to make it. She has some other obligations come up that she had to attend to. When she asked me to speak today, she showed me the questions that we were supposed to be answering, and I took a deep breath because it is something that is going on in our world today, and something that is very relevant and very thought after, especially in my generation. People look at organization of religion, much like my counterpart up here has said, that it causes wars, that the division between religions causes hatred in the world. And a lot of times we do see this. We've seen it throughout the history of time, and it's still here today, and it's very sad. That's why I'm grateful for the interfaith movement. But to move on to what my religion is doing, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to kind of take some of these issues at hand, is first you need to understand some of the fundamental doctrines of what we believe. One of our beliefs is that we claim the privilege of worshiping the Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, and that we allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, wherein, or what they may. So it's important to know that we do not force our beliefs upon anyone. That many of the members of our church are generational. That their mothers and fathers and grandparents were members of the church, and those principles and things were taught to the children. But what is important for us to understand is that we also believe that the greatest gift that God gave us is agency. The choice to choose between right and wrong and to make decisions for ourselves. Not to be acted upon, but to act. And so we allow our children to make these decisions for themselves as they grow older and as they grow wiser and want to do their own things. And we love them no matter what they choose to do, as long as what they do uplifts and inspires the world to become better. You know, from a very early age on in our church, I can remember at the age of 3 years old, standing up in Sunday school and giving a talk about our Father in heaven and His Son, Jesus Christ. This is an act that goes on every Sunday throughout the world in our congregations. We give young children the opportunity to stand up and what we call bear their testimony, or bear what they know to be true to those that are present within the congregation. It helps them grow. Some other things that we help to help our children grow in faith and spiritually is we hold many family things. We believe that we are sent here to this earth in families to help one another, because God knew that it'd be hard for us to do it here alone. Within the walls of our home, I think the greatest work is accomplished between a mother and a father. They teach their children the things of this world, and they teach their things about the God that sit them here. You know, within our homes, we do something called family night. where every Monday night we gather together as a family, and friends can come as well, and we have dinner with one another. And after dinner, we usually have activities and we share a spiritual message. My 2-year-old looks forward every Monday night to going over to his grandparents' house for family night. He's learning at a very young age who he is and why he's here. This is something that we believe as a church will help him as he gets older. Another way that we help combat these things is youth activities. From the age of 12 to 18, boys and girls in the church are involved in youth activities. Boy Scouts of America. The young women are involved in something called personal progress, where they, sorry, my arm's weak.
Yep.
You know, I'm putting myself to sleep. You know, we involve the young women in something called personal progress, where they do service projects around town, where they go out, where they're a good, involved member of society. And at the same time, they're learning the values of Christianity and what our Savior would do here upon this earth. Boys and girls at the age of 18 and 20 have the opportunity to serve missions, like I did. I can tell you this much. I got off the plane in Toronto, Canada, and I met my mission president, and he handed me some money. He handed me a nickel. And I thought, wow, he's giving me, a nickel. Welcome to Canada. Here's a piece of their currency. Put it away and store it. And he said to me, no. He said, that is to get you on the subway car. And I thought, oh, well, what are we doing? He said, you are going to go onto the subway car, and you are going to bear your testimony to someone on that subway car about God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. And so, I arrived in Canada in January from Arizona, extremely cold. I hopped on this subway car, and missionaries have name badges. And I had a name badge that said, Elder Basha, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I stopped then, and instantly when I walked into the subway car, I saw 5 people look at me and close their eyes and act as if they were asleep. And so I found someone that actually made eye contact with me. And I went up and I bore their testimony to them about the things that I knew was true here upon this earth, and the things that I knew that they could become, and who they were and where they came from. And at that moment in time, when I got off that subway train and I gathered myself about the experience I just had, I had converted myself. I knew that God loved me. I knew that He cared about me. And I knew that the teachings that I had been taught as a young boy and up through my youth were true. At that moment in time, I truly believed and knew that my spiritual journey would only grow if I were to remain active in the things that my parents had taught me. I'm grateful for my mission and for those things. It's important to know that in our religion that we believe we never act in fear. That fear is not a characteristic of God. We fear God in that we reverence Him and that we humble Him. But we do not fear, because fear is not a characteristic of our Father in heaven. That is what we believe. We believe that He's all-knowing, that He's kind, that He's loving, that He's optimistic, and that He's careful, that He cares for us, and that He knows each of us by name. We believe these things because we believe that if we teach these things to our children and to those that come within the walls of our church, that they'll feel the Spirit of God there and that they will not want to leave. We believe that all people are good, that we all came from a Father in heaven that loves us, that we're all brothers and sisters trying to make it back to Him, that He cares for us. And though that we may have different beliefs, that we have one thing in common, that He lives and that He exists, and that He wants us to return home to Him. As we teach our children these principles, and as we teach those that come within the walls of our church these things, something inside them sparks. They have a remembrance of once hearing that before they came here to this earth, and they have a desire to stay. Yes, we have some that fall away from the beliefs of the church, and we have some that come in. But it does not matter to us as long as they're striving to do what's right, and as long as they know that we love them and that we care for them. I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Preston. And I loved your story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I took from that was that the part of I think most of us know that LDS faith is very active in missions, and that what it does is not only grow the LDS faith, but it reinforces the person who is on the mission in their faith, which is what happened to you. And things like family home night, family night, and testimonials, and things like that are also bringing reinforcement into the person who is giving them and the family that is giving them. And then there's a lot of generational growth by the movement as well, by the faith. So, our next speaker is Dr. Leah Sarat. She is the Assistant Professor of Religious Studies at Arizona State University and the author of the book Fire in the Canyon: Religion, Migration, and the Mexican Dream. Dr. Sarat is the advisor of ASU's campus interfaith group, Sun Devils Are Better Together, that Johnny is a part of as well, and a volunteer coordinator with the Phoenix Restoration Project, an organization providing support to individuals in immigration detention in Arizona and those who are newly released. Dr. Sarat's work explores the intersection of religion and migration in Mexico and the southwest borderlands, with particular attention to the religious and social implications of U.S.-Mexico border policy. She received her PhD in religion in the Americas from the University of Florida and joined the religious studies faculty at ASU in 2010. Please help me welcome Dr. Leah Sarat.
Thank you, Mitzi. It's great to be here, and nice to see some familiar faces out there, and also I look forward to meeting some new people. I must say that among my things that I've accomplished at ASU, one of my proudest is having the chance to be an instructor and advisor to groups such as Sun Devils Are Better Together. Johnny was actually a student in one of my classes, and to hear him speaking today, I just feel so proud. I'd like today to start by sharing some insights that are based on my perspective as a scholar of religion in North America and the US-Mexico borderlands. And then in the time remaining, I'll switch hats a little bit and do something I don't often get to do, which is to speak from my own faith perspective. And I identify as someone who actually has moved in the opposite direction, early on identifying as spiritual but not religious, but through various life experiences, including volunteer work, and some of my research activities, I've actually sought out and become a part of various Christian organizations and communities, including the United Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ. Not only because I like to sing in choirs, which I do, but also because I agree with the words of the much beloved figure in the Arizona Interfaith scene, Tex Sample, who's no longer with us here in Phoenix. But he used to say, you can no sooner be a Christian by yourself than you can commit adultery alone. And I've learned the wisdom of those words over the years and learning about community. So first, to put on my professor hat, to look at some numbers, I've drawn some figures from the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, just to give us a sense, what are we talking about quantitatively when we're talking about a decline in religious affiliation? And indeed, in the United States, formal religious affiliation is indeed declining. According to a Pew survey, the religiously unaffiliated made up about 16% of the US population in 2010. And based on various demographic trends, they project that that number will grow by 26% of the total US population by 2050. Now this trend is shared by other countries with relatively lower fertility rates and aging populations throughout Europe, Canada, also Japan. But the new element that I'd like to get us to think about today is if we look at global trends, things begin to look very different. In the world as a whole, religious affiliation is not declining, it's growing. The same Pew Forum projects that between 2010 and 2050, the religiously unaffiliated will decline from 16.4% to 13.2% of the world's total population. So that's growing slightly in the US, but if we look at numbers in the world as a whole, people are joining religions in greater numbers, and those religions are growing. Christians, they project, will remain the largest single religious group in the world. 4 in 10 of the world's Christians will live in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have to get our scope outside of the geographical United States, look at ourselves in a larger context, look at where religions are growing and flourishing and why. They also project that Islam will grow faster than any other religion in the world. So perhaps our question ought not to be, why are people leaving organized religions, as it ought to be, why are they doing so in the United States? And why are they not doing so in many other parts of the world? What changes when we place ourselves in a global perspective? What can we learn from the experiences of those in other countries in the global south? And how might this revitalize our religious communities, if that's indeed what we seek to do? So first of all, what's unique about the United States? So I want to draw from another piece of scholarship by an author named Lisa Mercadante. She's the author of the book Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. This is an author who sought to figure out what was going on among the non-affiliated, or nuns, as we sometimes hear them called. I don't know how I feel about the term nuns. We can talk about that in the question. But she finds that within that category in the US, those who call themselves spiritual but not religious, and in religious studies we actually abbreviate it SBNRs, so there you go. They constitute the largest category. About 18% of the US population, US adults, currently consider themselves spiritual but not religious. And this, oddly enough, includes people who attend services at a place of worship, and yet some of them say, but actually I'm spiritual but not religious, if you ask them. Okay. This scholar interviewed about 100 people, had informal conversations with hundreds more. And what she finds is that the rise in the spiritual but not religious is not simply about a push toward greater individualism, although individualism, we know that ethic is very prominent in our culture, but it's also kind of a loosely cohesive cultural and intellectual movement. In other words, right, everyone's going out and seeking their own understanding of meaning and faith, but they're doing so in ways that share commonly identifiable traits. Right, not identifying as part of a single SBNR movement, right, and yet they share some things in common, including some of the obvious ones we might think of. Viewing religion as a personal choice, rejecting exclusivity, in other words, rejecting the notion that a single tradition has the entire truth at the exclusion of others. But the shared trait that I find most interesting that she points out is that those who identify as spiritual but not religious, she says they tend to share some traits of being post-Christian. Again, we're talking about the United States, where Protestant Christianity has been dominant, maybe not necessarily in terms of numbers anymore today. Well, it's still very high up there, but culturally dominant. So post-Christian means they reject elements of organized Christianity, but they do so in ways that are very much shaped and influenced by Christianity. For example, those identifying as spiritual but not religious reject many beliefs of conservative Protestant Christianity, but at the same time they stress that belief is really what matters. You got to get your belief right. This is a very Protestant notion. They are also very Protestant on another count, on the notion that you have both the freedom to continually critique your faith and also the obligation to do so. So think of the long history of Protestant spirit of critique that gave rise to so many different splintering denominations from the very foundation of this country. Finally, those identifying as spiritual but not religious believe that inner experience and the self is the only true authority. And there may be sources of this within faiths throughout the world, but this author identifies this as specifically post-Christian because it is shaped by the Protestant legacy in which individuals access the Bible on their own, right? It's taking another step. You don't even need a religious text now, and yet it's been shaped by that tradition in which you're rejecting outside authorities. The individual can access the Word of God on their own through the Protestant tradition, and now today those identifying as spiritual but not religious are carrying upon that, building upon that legacy, although they might not always identify themselves as doing so. Okay. So here is where I transition into a little bit of my own work and life experience. And just my hunch, I haven't done research on this significantly, but is that we have to, if we want to engage with those identifying in this way, we have to recognize the extent to which our society's preoccupation with belief has stymied us. We have to go about it in a different way, perhaps through the back door. And here's where the connection to global religiosity comes into play. We have to ask, how do people know what they know? Who do they know? Who are they in contact with? What are they doing in their bodies? What is their embodied experience that leads them to move away from traditional religious communities? So my own movement of moving from someone identifying primarily as spiritual to actually seeking out and joining places of worship came through face-to-face relationships. Early on in my volunteer work, I volunteered after college at a women's shelter in Ciudad Juarez on the border. I was just learning Spanish, and I found that as I met with women who had struggled with some really tough life circumstances, and I learned to speak with them and figure out what was going on and how we could be of service, I found that they talked about God, they prayed many to the Virgin Mary. I found a living, breathing, concrete faith in action that was something very different from belief, because I could see that it was real in their lives. And it wasn't real to me at first, but as I was their community member, their sister, and their friend, as I shook their hands, as I hugged them, a little bit of that reality started to become part of my own reality. Later in my research, in a Pentecostal migrant community in Mexico that sends many people to the United States, some members of this community actually live here in Phoenix, I would attend services as a researcher in my anthropological mode. But as I did it, as I went through the actions of going up to the front of the altar to pray with people who were praying for relatives in the United States, praying for safety in crossing the border, dealing with hardship when someone had nearly lost his life at the border and came back home to recuperate, as I went through those actions with people, I found that I began to cry when they would cry, even though the belief wasn't coming first. But it was the reality that was shared in that physical living contact with other human beings. So I ask that we understand that religious community has to do with visceral experiences that only make sense in relationship. Let's put the belief question aside to start with and think about how can we generate new relationships? How can we bring our congregations and our communities into a living connection with those, including those in the global south, including those in our communities, for whom faith is not a personal choice, but a life and blood necessity and reality, and how might we be challenged and changed in the process. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Dr. Leah, thank you so much for your extremely eloquent and very well presented presentation, and for giving us all those statistics and all the research that, I don't know if you did it for this presentation or if they came from your own studies, but thank you, or if it was a mixture, but thank you so much for sharing all of that and sharing your own journey and really reaching into the heart of what it is that community and that visceral feeling and that relationship that we have that is visceral. So thank you very, very much for that. So our final panelist today, by no means, when you say least, last but not least, by no means least at all, is Pastor Saeed Hosseini. Hosseini. And he is from Phoenix First Assembly. Now, Pastor Saeed has a very interesting background. He was born into a Muslim family and graduated from Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, with a degree in computer science. In 1979, he married his beautiful wife, Dr. Cynthia, who is sitting there with the camera right there, her phone, just a lovely, beautiful lady. She is a former Mormon. In 1987, literally changing their lives forever, God used dramatic experiences for each of them to meet and fall in love with Jesus and dedicate their lives to Him. In 1996, they moved to Phoenix. On 9/11/2001, they began pastoring the prayer ministry at Phoenix First Assembly on 9/11. Yeah. In January 2013, they launched the Global 365 Prayer Network, a 24/7 with 20 nations, 100,000 plus strong prayer warriors. He is now fulfilling his twofold vision to see prayer pavilions open all around the world as a prayer evangelist, live streaming intercessory prayer and bringing business and ministry together to be marketplace ministers. Today, Pastors Saeed and Cynthia travel across the globe leading prayer conferences, Bible studies, and sowing seeds of encouragement. Pastor Saeed is the author of 3 books. Both he and Pastor Cynthia offer numerous teachings on CD and DVD. They received their Doctorate of Divinity from Phoenix University of Theology and make their home in Scottsdale. And I have been to Pastor Saeed's prayer service on Tuesday nights at Phoenix First, and it is amazing because he puts the flags of all the countries up around the prayer pavilion, which is just glorious by itself, and prays extensively for all of the churches and all of the people in the valley, and it's just so active. So I'm so excited to welcome and hear from Pastor Saeed. Will you help me welcome him?
Well, thank you so much for having us today. The topic of discussion today, the death of religion. There was an interesting article that just read last week that said the top 10 de-churched cities in America, and it listed them. And Phoenix was number 9 of de-church, not unchurched, but de-church. Those that have gone to church but now no longer are going. I want to make a statement here right off the bat that may shock you, but that's the kind of person I am. I just say it like it is. I despise religion. I hate religion. Religion causes wars. Religion causes division. Religion is man-made. I love relationships. Now we have heard different discussions here on the relationships that individuals try to have with their Creator. But as Apostle Paul said, I know one thing, and I just know one thing. I know Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And the reason I say that is not because of religion, it's because of an experience. As you heard earlier, when I got married, my wife was a Mormon and I was a Muslim. You put a Muslim and a Mormon together, you get a very confused family. Yet, when I have a different perspective being raised in another country in the Middle East and from a different faith, one that I practiced growing up, not because I wanted to, because of obedience to my parents. And I saw a lot of things that, frankly, always left me with more questions than I had answers. But I did it based on tradition, based on what my family required of me. So when I came here to America at the age of 13, I basically didn't want to have anything to do with religion or God or anything. Yet there was something in me that knew there had to be more to life. So when we got married, and I told my wife, I don't want any religion into our house. Do not ever bring religion into our house. Because I was so turned off by it. I said, when our kids grow up, they can decide what they want to be. So now it became, my goal became being successful, trying to find that happiness in things. We went to the North Chicago and franchised with Domino's Pizza. Became very successful, very, very fast. And those things that I thought were going to make me happy, none of them were making me happy. The more it seemed like we acquired, the emptier I became. I describe myself as man that was breathing but was dead. It was as though I had this unscratchable itch, an itch that I could not scratch. No matter what I tried to use to scratch this itch of mine, I couldn't do it. Therefore, we were trying to find happiness, joy, hope, those things, in material things, in different things, in society, in doing good for others, in drugs, alcohol, whatever those things that the world says are going to make you happy. But no matter what it was, the more it was, it became, the more empty we became. Until we had reached a point where my wife and I were actually going to separate, get a divorce. To where one day when I came home, and I had told my wife not to bring religion in this house, but I came home that day and she was sitting there and reading the Bible to our little boy, the Bible that her father had given to her that he had just passed away. And I got very upset. Of course, we had a huge argument, etc., etc., but make a long story short, we decided we tried everything else in the world there is. Why not try this God of yours? So she had been going to this church that she had found on the paper, and I went. I said, okay, I'll go. I was ready to go. When I walked into that place, what I felt, what I experienced, the love, the atmosphere, is what I had been looking for, had not been able to find. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew something had attracted, something was so real to me. I went for quite a few months until I had my own experience, which I won't get into it, but it was a dramatic experience where God himself became real to me in a moment, in an instant. I had no more questions who this God was. His name was Jesus. I went up front and I met him. I said, I need to meet him. I said this prayer, and they said, okay, prayer of salvation. To me, it didn't register, because growing up as a Muslim, what do I need to do? See, religion is about doing. I was used to doing. So I need to find out, what do I need to do? They said, nothing. What do you mean, nothing? What do I pay? What do I sign up? Nothing. They said, it's grace. I couldn't understand grace. I never experienced grace before, because up to this point, you hope to do, and you hope you've done enough that you end up in heaven someday, and you're never sure. But that day, by grace, I was assured, by faith, that I had to accept this. Then our life started to change dramatically, to where business meant nothing. And God started to shift in our lives to where now I had met this man named Jesus, and I knew he was real. My goal in life became to know him. I met the man. It's one thing to meet Jesus, it's another thing to know him. I had such an experience with him that I wanted to know him more than anything else in the world. So business started to take backseat. And God started to do this shift in us to where he led us to sell all of our businesses in Chicago and move to Phoenix, Arizona. He didn't say you're going to be a pastor, because if he told me in Phoenix, in Chicago, you're going to be a pastor, I probably would have run to Canada. So I didn't want it. We came here to retire. We came here to just, but it was all by God's divine direction that he was doing all this. The death of religion that's happening right now, I can tell you by my own experience. Many times, people go to churches or synagogues or mosques, whatever it is you want to call it, wherever they go, to meet God, only to meet man again, only to have another experience with man. That's why people are saying, I'm tired of church. I don't want church. You must forgive me. And when we say all roads lead to the same place, all religions are the same. Well, it's true. All religions are the same. Because they do end up the same road. Because religion enslaves you. Religion does not give you that peace. Religion does not give you that assurance. Only a relationship with the living God does. And that's what we are experiencing in our churches today. We have become so seeker-friendly that we have forgotten to become spirit-friendly. So we're trying to please people by coming into our church. We're trying to survey them. What is it you like about our church? What is it you don't like, so we don't preach about it so you can come back? Is that what God desires from us? Is that what religion is all about, to please people, or is it to please God? Because if we keep trying to please people, people are fickle, and they change. Today they might want this, tomorrow they want something else. So, but this is what happens with some preachers, some pastors. They stick their finger up in the air, the wind blows, they go, okay, we're going to go this way this month. Okay, people like it this way, next month we're going to go that way. Well, when I read the Bible, it says, my God does not change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He changes not. And the reason my sister over there so eloquently spoke about globally, religions are growing globally, and it's not happening in America. Why? Because we are so comfortable here in America. We've had so much in America that we just say we don't need God. We have our own gods. In other countries, they are so open to miracles. They are so open to the Word of God. That's why miracle happening instantly, because they come to God in such a way with no preconceived ideas. And God shows up and He does a miracle and He changes them instantly, just like He did that day for me and my wife, the same day. That is the reason why there is a death of religion in America, because we are trying to please men instead of pleasing God. Our prayer meetings, as Mitzi said, we have created an environment to where we worship God, we pray, it's real. We have created an environment not comfortable for man, but comfortable for God. We're always interested in making it comfortable for man so they will come into our presence, onto our churches. What if we made it comfortable for God so He would want to come into our midst in our churches? Then you will see people flock to churches like never before. Then you will see people flock to synagogues or wherever the places of worship might be, because God Almighty Himself will show up with power. And just like Paul says, I know one thing, Christ and Him crucified. He said, I don't come to you with eloquent speech or doctrines. He said, I'll come to you with the power of God and the demonstration of power. And wherever Paul went, miracles happened, followed him. And why is that? Because Paul used to be Saul, and he had his own experience with God. Once you have your own experience with the living God Himself, you will never ever be at the someone else's argument or theology, because that's all we have up here is theology or argument. But God, you experience Him, and He'll show you the true relationship. Thank you so much.
I told you an amazing panel today, right? Just awesome. And I loved what you said, that, I loved your opening about that you hate religions, but because it's about pleasing man, not pleasing God. That is very powerful, and your message was very powerful, so thank you. And thank you also for all you do in the Valley, for praying for everyone in the Valley, for praying for all the churches, for holding that prayer temple, and for seeing miracles occur in people's lives. So thank you again, Pastor Saeed. So we come to the time now where it's your